Hello again everyone, thanks for joining me for another Allan Holdsworth lesson video. If you watched my last video that I did, I said that the next video we're going to do is Material Real, and today is the day. This song, in my opinion, is probably the second hardest Allan Holdsworth song to play physically. There are just some crazy, ridiculous stretches in there, and if you've seen my top 10 hardest Allan Holdsworth voicings or chords, you'll see that there are a few of those chords that are in there, including the number one chord are in this song. Luckily, I'll be showing some other alternate ways to play it, so people who are a bit more human like me can actually at least come close to playing them. But of course, I'll show you the way that Allan plays them, and then I'll show you some alternate ways of playing it, or maybe even some workarounds so you don't have to really stretch that hard. So even though the chords are really crazy, the one good thing about this song is that there aren't really that many chords in it, and it's relatively short and repetitive. There's only some slight variations, but every time the verse or chorus or pre-chorus comes back, it's usually the same thing. So there's not going to be that many sections. So anyway, let's get started. Material Real. Okay, so we're going to talk about the intro section. Now, before I start showing you the chords, I wanted to talk a little bit about, I think, how this part came to be. So, during Allan's live shows, and I'm sure you guys have seen if you've watched his live videos or been to any of his shows, there's certain parts of the show where he just plays these swell guitar parts. Sometimes they're called zones, or prayer, where he uses all this, he improvises a swell chordal kind of part. It's really beautiful sounding. And it seems to be that some of these parts, these swell sections from songs, I think originated from him just sort of noodling on the guitar, or writing something sort of specific and kind of going off of that sort of idea and that vibe and improvising it live before sections. So I think it was in his '82 tour, this part actually existed. It was usually the segue into, I believe, Drifting into the Attack. And then I guess he liked that part so much that he decided, well, I'll just keep that and just write a song around it. So in early performances in '82, and I think maybe even '83, I'm not entirely sure about that, you can actually hear this part being played. And also there's like another smaller section that also appears in there as well. So the way that I think the intro chord sort of came to be was Allan likes to do this kind of variation. Now it's not a specific scale kind of thing. I think it's just him just grabbing the chord in a certain way. He usually will just bar with his first finger, and his second finger will either be on like the D string or the A string. His third finger will be on the B string, and his pinky will go up to the high E. And kind of just play these really kind of gnarly swell things like kind of weirdo kind of things. And I think that part sort of inspired him to come up with the first chord of the song, and if you've seen my top 10 hardest Allan Holdsworth chords, this was in there. It's this really crazy B major add 9. Yeah, really tough. You gotta do this bar with your first finger on the 11th fret and then do all this extra stretching, so I could barely do that. I think of this chord as a B major add 9. You can also think of it as an E flat minor 7 sharp 5. But because of its inherent major sound, I would probably think this is better as a B major add 9. Now, because this chord is so difficult, I would consider an easier way of doing this, where you can still sort of get the same vibe. So, like I said, it's a B major with the 9 added. It might be easier just to sort of play B major like this, where you're barring on the 16th frets, rather, sorry, and using your first finger to play the C sharp in the bass, or the 9. And that will probably get you by where you can play that part pretty convincingly without it being too crazy. And it's relatively simple. It's just B major with the 9 in the bass. Then the next chord is this E major add 9. Now this chord is pretty wicked. I don't think it's like impossible, but it's just hard to sort of reach. It actually gets harder a little bit later in the song. later in this part rather. We got an E major here, E, B, and G sharp, and then we're playing an F sharp with our first finger. If you want, you can play the chord in a different way. These sort of add 9 voicing Allan uses. This would be E major add 9, and if we take the G sharp, move it to G, the E minor add 9. These voicings are actually easier to play in the middle 4 strings, the D, G, B strings. I should say A, D, G, B strings. So if you want, you can actually play the chord like this. But because there's if you don't have a guitar that has like a Steinberger that doesn't have all this extra meat on it, it'll probably be much easier to do. But for me, I have a difficult time playing it this way because this PRS is not really intended to play up high on the neck like this, so this cutaway really gets in the way. But that's an option that you can play that add 9 chord like this. I think I also mentioned this voicing in my top 10 Hardest Allan chords as well. So after that, E major add 9, it goes to an F sharp major with an add 11. Now, once again, because I have all this extra meat, I'm not going to be able to really play it perfectly. But we have an F sharp major triad, and then we're adding in the perfect fourth. That's how Allan's playing. Of course, he's playing more like this. Now, if I try to play it this way, my pinky actually bars and touches all the other strings. So an easier way to play this if you want to get the same point across is you can just play a regular F sharp major and just hammer on to the perfect fourth, like that. Or you can just play the fourth on top instead of the major third. That's really the only other way of doing it. And then after that, it goes to a C sharp minor add 9 to an A major add 9. And that's the chord, this particular voicing that's in that video. So once again, you can take these chords and make them easier to play by playing them on the middle 4 strings. So you would have a C sharp minor 9 to A major add 9. And then it goes back to a B major with the add 11. So we have our B major triad, adding in the 11. And then from here we have these minor major 7 chords in third inversion. We've seen this chord before. I think it's also in Zarabeth. We have a B minor triad with the major 7 and the bass. I mean, if you want, you can think of it as a B flat augmented with the flat 9 on top, but to me I don't think it's a very nice sounding name for this chord. I think it makes more sense as a B minor major 7 in third inversion. So it goes B minor major 7 to G minor major 7 to D minor major 7. Now from here, Allan actually takes his first finger and moves it down a half step to a G sharp and plays the upper part of the chord. So here we really have a E7 flat 9 chord, E, D, G sharp, and then the F, with this 13 really ringing out on the bottom. If you want, I get a 13 flat 9 chord. When I hear that, I think of the diminished scale, but I'm not entirely sure how Allan's really interpreting it, if it's part of that or it's just a 7 flat 9, but that's at least what he's playing. Then from here we get the really tough chords. We've got this C, so it's all stacked perfect fifths. C power chord, C fifth, G fifth, and a D fifth. C, G, D, and A. This might have been part of his inspiration for starting to tune the guitar in fifths. Also, this chord is in road games. It's the same voicing, just now it's moved to C. So I guess this is like a 6 sus2, or if you think it's like sus2 add 13 if you want. So it's the bottom 4 notes, and then your first finger is barring G, barring the 8th fret, so you're playing the G there. And then what makes this chord really difficult is your first finger goes down a half step. So now you have a G major at 9. But this is where it's different. This whole section repeats as the chorus of the song, or what I consider the chorus. But it's the swell section. During the chorus it's more arpeggiated. But this is where it's different. Allan plays the opening different than he plays the chorus. After this, G major with an add 9, you actually just don't bar with your first finger, you play the low E, like that. So you really have like an E minor 11 sound, like that. So that's really the first half of the intro section, and then it goes into the material unreal part that Allan would play live. The ending, though, is more what he actually really did with all the modulating, but the beginning part of it is just a little taste. So I'll explain what those chords are in the next section, and towards the end I'll just talk about the modulating. So I like to think of this section as like a cell, and that cell moves around. So I'll talk about the chords themselves, and then, like I said, the modulating later. So the first part of the chord, the first part of the section I should say, and it's in a weird time signature, it's in like an 11/8, and this is where, at least when Allan revised this part later in his career, this was a section for the drums to sort of go crazy. So it's part of this G minor triad, like we saw in the Things You See. Same triad that Allan loves to use. So we have a G, a B flat, and a D, G minor. But we're starting with the A with our pinky, and it's pulled off, or you can pick it, makes no difference. So we're adding in the 9. So I would think of this as a G minor and 9. Well, at least the vibe of this part. Then that first finger moves up to E flat. Now we have an E flat major triad, and then you put your pinky on a D, and now you have an E flat major 7. So it's like a G minor add 9 to an E flat major 7. Then you keep your middle finger down, and you put your first finger to an A flat, and your third finger goes to E, and your pinky jumps all the way up to this high C. Now I'm not going to talk about this chord right away. I'll talk about it, how it relates to the next part. Because then you move your third finger from E to F. Now that's really that cell section, that's that whole part that gets transposed over and over again. Now if we look at this chord, and we look at this C, if I move that C down an octave, we have this A flat minor major, A flat major 7, sharp 5, and then if I add the E to F, we have an A flat major 13. Or you can think of this as a first inversion F minor add 9, because we have an F, we have our root, the flat 3, and we have the 5th F minor, and then we're adding in G, which is the 9. So that particular section, I'm actually thinking as it's a minor major 9. So this is an F minor add 9, but now your third finger is playing the major 7, and then you move the major 7 to what the root of the chord would be. So I think of that whole 2-chord little part as F minor major 9. So I'll play it once again: G minor add 9, E flat major 7 to an F minor major 9. That then gets moved up a perfect 4, so now we have a C minor add 9. That first finger goes up to G sharp, so now we have a G sharp major triad, and this is what's strange. You play an E there. So this is really odd because this is such a nice sounding resolution, and it's weird because we have an augmented triad right there, but it doesn't sound like it. So we're adding in the sharp 5 or the flat 13 or flat 6 there. But it works. This doesn't sound dissonant to me. And then it moves to the last chord, which is one of my favorites. I love listening to this chord. When you hear or listen to old recordings where Allan played this part live, almost every time you get to this chord, you just hear everyone in the audience just go, ah, because it's such a beautiful resolution. This is one of my favorite vocal tracks and one of my favorite things that Allan's wrote. It's just such a shame that it's so difficult to play. So this chord right here, we have like a nice open F major 9 chord, because we have our F major triad right here, F, A, C, and our first finger is playing the major 7, we're playing an open G, and our pinky's playing a C on the top. This is a chord that Allan likes to use frequently with that open G string, and just moving it up and down the neck always sounds really nice. Actually, the end chord of the song is that in first position, and also it's in Water on the Brain. But I mean, you can basically move this chord anywhere if you want. I'm sorry, I was playing it wrong. I didn't even realize it. Just always, to me, it always sounds nice. So that's that last chord in that section, and then it goes right to the verse. So that whole section is also the chorus, just with that one note different, and it's arpeggiated. So when it comes back, I'll just talk about that difference. So here's the verse section. Now the verse section of the song is not a walk in the park either. It's got really crazy stretching it, but you can manipulate it how you want, so you can make it as easy or as difficult as you want. So the vibe of this beginning part is really this sort of motif, where you basically got your pinky on an A, and then there's a G sus2 triad here. You got a G, A, and a D. So you're pulling off the A to G. What makes this part really tough is Allan's also following the bass, or the bass is following Allan, by playing notes on the low E string, and that's where it gets really hard. So the beginning of it, you're playing a low E with that. So this has got like a E minor 11 kind of sound, because we got E, G, A, and a D in there. So this is what it's also, the rhythm of what the right hand is doing is also a little difficult to hear, but I think this is what it is. And what's interesting is those little last two chord stabs, your pinky is playing an A and your first finger is playing an A. Don't know why Allan did that, but that's what's going on there. So where it gets hard, you then play a C with your middle finger. It's the same thing on top, but now C is your root, not E. So with this, it's like you're taking that 13 and you're pulling off to your 5th, but you still have the 13 there, or the 6. So this is like a 6/9 kind of sound, or a 6 sus2 chord, because we have 1, 5, 6, and then the sus2. So that happens for one measure. Then you actually bar, because now your first finger is playing a B with that same motif on the top. So this is like a B minor 7 sharp 5, or G add 9. Then you do that again on G sharp. So this is a G sharp minor 7 sharp 5, or an E major add 9. So it sounds like this. And then your second finger plays an A. So then once again you have that 6 sus2 chord, A, 6 sus2. So this is what it should sound like. Then your pinky goes back on that F sharp, pull off to E, play a G sharp with your thumb, and then open E, and then F sharp, E. So that whole part sounds like this, if I can play it without my hand cramping up. That verse, and this whole verse basically happens the same way every time, with some slight variations at the end. So this is like the first verse. Then you end up playing a D major triad with the open G. So it's a D major with an add 11. And you move that shape down to C. Then you play this little note motif where you play C, E, slide up to F sharp, play the open G, F sharp, D, and then back to C. Then you add the upper two notes of that C chord, a C and an E, and you move that chord up to a whole step to D. But now, because we have an E and a G, it becomes a D major with an add 9 and an add 11. And then that part repeats identically the same way, just with something a little bit different at the end. After that chord part, you almost have that same motif, but you use a chord that we did earlier, that F major 9 chord. You slide that up to G. And because you have an open G, it's just a regular G major 7. And that's the verse. That part happens a little bit later, a slight different variation, and with a slightly different ending. So after that goes, I guess, what I would call the pre-chorus section. I consider that intro part the chorus section, but this would be the pre-chorus section. And I see me. Well, the fun never stops with this song because it just keeps on getting harder and more challenging. The beginning of this part starts off with a simple E major triad. E, B, and a G sharp. This kind of voicing appears a little bit later, but in a minor, as a minor triad. So we have E major, and then it goes to this, an A, an F sharp, and a G sharp. Now I'm gonna step away from what I normally do when I name these chords, because the bass is playing a D, and I think it's playing a D. This part of the song, or this chord rather, has a really strong Lydian sound to me. So if we assume the D is the root, we have a D, A, F sharp, and a G sharp, and I hear that G sharp as a sharp 11. Of course, like I said, the root isn't being played here. But then what happens is Allan then plays this little note motif where he slides up from that G sharp to an A, and then your first finger, which is barring the 5th fret, plays the C there. So this is really a 7 sharp 11 kind of sound, like that. Then we get to this next weirdo kind of chord. This is another typical, like, well, what you name this chord, whatever you want. But I believe Allan is thinking of C major or D Dorian here, even though that's, to me, not the root. It's built off of this shape. So it's so if we look at it, we have like a 1, flat 6, flat 7, and a 4, sus4. So maybe like a sus4, sharp 5 or something, or like like a 7, sharp 5, sus4. But also we have an, if you want to think of F as your root, maybe you have an F and a G and an A. So we have a 1, 2, 3, and then we have a D, which is our 13 maybe. So maybe this is like a 6, 9 kind of thing. You know, it's whatever you feel like you want to interpret it as. But I think of this very much as like an Aeolian kind of chord. So from here, Allan then adds this other note motif. He goes from G to B, which is also belongs to Aeolian or C major. Then you play the E on the B string, 5th fret, and then you hammer on with your pinky on a G. All belonging to C major. And then you move that shape up to B. Now this is not really a defined chord here because you have 2 B's, but you're playing a B with your pinky on the 12th fret, and then that kind of little minor 7 sharp 5 thing that Allan likes to do a lot. We'd have a C sharp, an A, and then a B here, all while you're holding that B on top. So it's not really a defined chord, but I would probably say this makes the most sense to me as like a minor 7 sharp 5. Then we get to this really weird little part, this chord section. Allan plays this. So if let's say a root F, a C, an E flat, and then a B or sharp 11. So we're not going to know the name of this chord until we start adding more notes. So that's the first part of the chord that's played, and then Allan adds all these extra notes. place a C there, then an A with your pinky, so that gives us a little bit more to work with, and then you take your right hand and you tap a G sharp, like that. So with all those notes, what do we have? Well, I see F, C, A, and an E flat, so right there we got an F dominant. We got the sharp 11, the B, but we also have that G sharp, which is the sharp 9. So this is like a F7, sharp 9, sharp 11 chord. Now this chord, I'm pretty sure, doesn't belong to any particular mode or scale of harmonic minor or harmonic major, but I believe it actually belongs to the E half whole diminished scale. I don't know if this is what Allan's actually thinking of, but the chord fits within that scale. It just doesn't have one of the notes. It doesn't have a D in it, which would give really, it would be like the 13. Also, it would be missing the F sharp in there, but it almost has all the notes, I would think, for a E half whole diminished scale chord. So it's an F7, sharp 9, sharp 11. And then we move into this weird chord, which is really the same voicing that we did for the minor add 9s, but now you're on the middle strings. But now when you take that shape, we have an A C sharp, and an E, an A major triad, and we're adding in the sharp 11. Which is one thing that Allan loves. He loves his 11s and sharp 11s, just voicing them in a weird way. So I'm thinking A major with an add sharp 11. Now here's the toughest chord of this section, which I have the most difficulty with. I was going to actually put this in my top 10 hardest Allan chords, but I decided not to do it because I thought there were others that were more challenging, so this almost made the cut. You basically have a B flat major 7 chord here, but now what you do is you're replacing the 5th and the major 3rd with the sharp 11 and the 13. But you're also barring the 13th fret, so you have the 5th or the F on top. So this is a B flat major 13 with a sharp 11, and this chord is really challenging because of the space you need between your second finger and third finger while barring. That's what makes it so tough. But you can play this in an easier way. Instead of playing the B flat there, you can just ignore that and play the top half of the chord, and we have an F major 9 chord, which we've seen before in this voicing also appears in blank it out here, above and below, the last chord. Also belongs, it's in Bo Peep. So if you want, you can just play the top half of that there, and that'll get you by, because it's really that first finger barring that makes that so tough. And then from there it goes to D minor triad. Real simple, just like we did in the beginning there, but we've got a D, an A, and an F. Then we take that major 13 sharp 11 chord, move that down a whole step to A flat. Once again, you can just play the E flat on top. And then we have an F sharp minor triad. And then it goes to C minor. Now from here, Allan starts with this triad, but then adds notes going up. So we've got C minor, F sharp that we play with our third finger, a G with that we're playing on the B string. Our pinky plays in a B, another C on the high E string, and then our pinky plays an F sharp. So with all that stuff going on in there, we have a 1, 5, a flat 3, the sharp 11, and the major 7. So this whole section to me is C minor major 7, sharp 11. And then the last part of that part, the last chord, is just a G major add 9, which is the same voicing we did for E, now just up to G. Of course, trying to play that really high up on the neck is going to be too hard, so it might be a little bit easier to play it the way Allan does it. That's it, and then after that comes the chorus. Now, I forgot to play the swell part before, so I'm just going to play it here so you can hear it in context. As I said, it's the same thing, except the one note is different, and it's arpeggiated more. So we'll do the chorus section now. use a different guitar to play that swell section because, as I showed you, I can't reach that add 11 part on this guitar. I would have used that guitar for the lesson, but it doesn't have any frets, so I thought it would be harder to actually show you what's going on. But for playing purposes, I figured it would be fine. So it starts off the same exact way. I'll just sort of play through it kind of quickly. I'll play it the easier way, I guess. So that's what I would consider the simpler way of trying to play that. Instead of doing all the crazy stretches, then it's the same, the minor major 7 part. Now here's the difference, as I told you. It starts off the same way with the C 6sus2 chord. And this is where it's different. On the choruses, when the band starts, not the intro, Allan keeps his first finger barred on the 7th fret. So you're playing this while barring that F sharp, and that's what I said was the #1 hardest chord in any Allan song, in my opinion, because I just don't have the hands for it, and most people don't. Even if I try to play it with the bar here, my pinky cannot reach the 14th fret at all. It stops basically at this C on the 13th fret. I can't get it up here. And if I do it like this, I can't reach that to bar. But my friend Andre had pointed out that there is a easier way of doing this a while ago, and I thought about it, and I said, hey, you know what, you can actually change those 2 chords to make them more manageable. And you could do this for the intro part too, but I think it's more important to do it here because it's much faster. So an easier way to play that resolution is you basically take this like G sus2 chord shape with these 3 fingers, and you put it on C. So you're playing 8th fret, 7th fret, and 8th fret on the E, G, and D string. And then you use your first finger basically to bar, and you're doing that so you can reach the G here on the 5th fret and the A on the 5th fret on the high E string. So to play this part, see, the reason why Allan did it like this is because it's much easier to grab with the right hand. This one is a little bit more awkward for the left hand and to grab with the right hand, but it's not nearly as stretchy. So what you're doing is you're basically playing the outer 2 E strings and the inner 2 G and D strings for this part. So you're basically doing C on the low E on the 8th fret, D string 5th fret, which is a G, 7th fret on the G string, which is a D, and your first finger barring is playing the 5th fret on the high E string, which is an A. And then your 3rd finger on your right hand just plays the G here on the B string. And then the next chord, the one that's basically impossible, it's really like this G major 7 sus2 chord with a B in the bass. So you can treat it that way too, and you would play the chords the same way with the outer 2 and inner 2 strings, like that. So you'd have a G, a B, you'd have a B, a G, a D, and an A. And then you just finally play the F sharp on the B string. So that resolution, if I don't mess it up too badly, should sound like this. So that's easier to do, minus the open E string that I just played. It's a little bit more awkward, but at least it's manageable. And then from there, it goes right back into... That's it. So after that goes the verse variations and kind of the ending. So I'll just pause the video here for a little bit, and so I'll have a little bit more time to talk about it. So when the verse comes back here, it's instrumental the first time, basically, but the rhythm of it's a little bit different. It's the same chords, but like I said, the vibe is a little different. It goes like this. So that's where it's a little different. You kind of do that same weird A chord, the 6 with the 9. But with the, oh, I'm sorry, you start with the G sharp in the bottom, but then when you pull off is when you add the A, like that, which is really tricky. So I'll play from the B, and then you put your pinky back down on that F sharp, and then you do the pull off, and then opening. So that whole section sounds like this. Something like that. Like I said, it's really challenging to do that. Allan does a better job, but that's what's going on in there. And then the verse starts off again, but there's a slight difference in the ending here. It starts off the same way with the same rhythm again. At this part, instead of playing the, it goes right into the pre-chorus. It goes and this part, at least when it's played live, is instrumental. On the record, there was a little bit of soloing. Back to that impossible major 13 sharp 11 part. Whoops. And then back into the chorus again. I'll screw this part up. And then the outro cell section. So this outro section, this is really the material real part that Allan brought back in his set. So as I said, I think of them as that one cell, that 2 measure thing. That part gets modulated a perfect fourth all the way around until it goes back to B flat. So it really follows the circle of fourths. Now when I'm doing this, I'm not thinking of G minor. I'm thinking about what the lowest note my third finger has to play, which is B flat. So as I'm going through the cycle, I'm just going to yell out where to modulate to. So the first one is B flat. Then it goes to E flat. Did I say? Yeah, E flat. I'm sorry. Let me do that again. E flat. A flat. D flat. G flat. B. A, D, G, C, F, and then we're back to B flat, but after this, the G minor and 9 part, Allan plays this, which is the same variation that we did before, the pull off of the minor 7 sharp 5, but now it's in A. And then the last chord of the song is also the chord that's in Water on the Brain. It's the C sharp major 7 sharp 11. Or if you want, you don't even have to play the high E string with that. You can just do this, which I think sounds nicer anyway. So anyway, that's it. That's the song. it's a real hand killer, so I really strongly advise that if you're going to do this to really warm up and, you know, make sure you're nice and limber. So this is, in my opinion, the second Hardest Allan song. The reason why it's only second is because at least it's so short. But the next video that I'm going to do an easy one because I don't want anyone to get discouraged. We're going to do a simpler one that at least doesn't have that many crazy stretches in it, and it's relatively straightforward. So I hope you enjoyed this video and learned something from it, and don't hurt yourself. I don't want to get any messages that anyone got tendinitis or some sort of trigger finger or something with that. These chords are not easy, and they require not only larger hands but a good amount of stretching. I don't have large hands. I could just stretch pretty well, but I know my body, and I know when I'm really overexerting and when I need to take a break, and I know how to alter the chords when I need to in the sort of heat of the moment if I start to feel that my hand is starting to hurt. But it's not like I'm going to play the song live, but you have to know when to sort of hold back and not let your ego take part of trying to play this, because you don't want to hurt yourself. That's my final word. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you guys soon.